That's a cat. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a recipe that really kind of pulls on my heartstrings. They're my sour cherry hand pies. I've always loved sour cherry pie. It's truly one of my favorite things to make in the entire world. And this is just like a cuter portable version. So it's a really fun spin on a classic cherry pie.
What is your beef with McDonald's apple pie?
Oh, I have no beef with McDonald's apple pie. I've just never had one. But I don't think that they fry them anymore, or they use a different oil, or what?
You've never had one?
I never had one, but I've had like a McFlurry, which is delicious. The idea of a fried pie, like, does anything sound better than that? That sounds incredible, because when you think of frying, you think of like instant kind of puffing and cooking through and golden and crispy. And I really wanted to try a fried hand pie in What's for Dessert, and it actually fits into two different chapters. I had a hard time categorizing it because it could go in my stovetop chapter, because we don't even bake them, or it could go in the pie chapter, which is ultimately where I put it. But I do want to say, if you don't feel like deep frying these at home, you can absolutely make them and bake them. And in fact, what I might do is fry 4 of them and bake 4 to show you alternatives to frying. Right now we're shooting this, it's summer and sour cherries happen to be in season, but I know that they're a very fleeting fruit in most places if they're even available. So frozen works great. I actually prefer to use frozen fruit, so that's what I have today. This has a really classic look. It does have a kind of toaster strudel like sensibility. I do a little icing drizzle over the top of the fried ones. It's just like maximum visual appeal, I think, and having that like bright red shiny filling come out of these super flaky little hand pies with this icing on it. It just feels like pure, like sort of American dessert. Belongs at like a 4th of July picnic, even though you have to wait a year to do that. So ingredients. I have 2 portions of my all butter pie dough from What's for Dessert, 1 3/4 pounds of sour cherries, except there was a miscommunication, I would say, and Harris showed up with bags of mixed sweet and sour cherries. So that's totally fine. It's about equal parts. It just means I'm going to reduce the sugar a little bit, but you could do this with sweet cherries. Then everything else, very straightforward. Some granulated sugar, lemon, because I'm going to use some zest for the filling, a little juice for the icing. I have cornstarch, a little bit of kosher salt, some cinnamon for the filling, vanilla extract, and actually the recipe does call for almond extract, but I'm going to omit it so that Vinny is an allergy to these. Lastly, for the icing, a tablespoon of milk, some powdered sugar. There isn't a lot of special equipment, but you will need sort of a deep fry setup. So I'm actually going to fry these in a skillet. Over there, one ingredient I didn't point out that I already have over there is some neutral oil for frying. So like 4 to 6 cups neutral oil, peanuts, great. Use whatever you prefer for frying. And other than that, not a whole lot. This is just 1 portion of the pie dough in What's for Dessert, shaped into a square. And all I'm doing here is rolling it out, keeping that square dimension into a 12-inch square. It was rolled into a 12-inch square, but with rough edges. Then I trimmed it about a 1/2 inch around, so that would make it an 11-inch square. Now I'm going to cut it into 4 equal quadrants, which would make each quadrant its own 5.5-inch square.
Got it.
Got it? Okay, great.
And it has to be perfect.
No, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm forming these into triangles, so the more even the square, the better. So now I have my 4 pretty equal, approximately 5.5-inch squares. The dimension isn't as important as them just all being square and all being the same size and even thickness. So now I'm going to transfer those to a parchment lined baking sheet. Then I'm going to repeat with my second portion of pie dough, and then I'm all ready to form them once the filling is done. Keep this in the fridge and repeat with the second piece of dough. So these can all go on my baking sheet and into the fridge while I make the filling. So sour cherries and cherries in general are very, very juicy, and when you fry something, you're cooking it and there's like that direct contact with the oil, which is a really effective conductor. And so the outside is going to cook really, really fast. but it's not like in an oven where the dry heat, like there's time for the juices to thicken on their own and concentrate. So we have to basically pre-cook the filling to get it super thick and reduced so that it doesn't just like leak out all over everywhere into the pastry as you fry. I have my frozen cherries. Again, it's 1 3/4 pounds, about 5.5 cups. So these are gonna go into a large saucepan with my sugar. Now I measured everything out as if I were using sour cherries, but because I have a 50-50 mix, I'm going to reduce the sugar a little bit. So this is 2/3 of a cup, probably gonna use more like 1/3 to 1/2 cup. So I'm gonna go over to the stove and combine my filling ingredients. And actually, just to make my life a little easier, I'm gonna get rid of this little bit of milk and powdered sugar because that's for the glaze at the end. So to cook my filling, I'm gonna combine the cherries and some of that sugar in this large saucepan. And now these are thawed, so you can see that there's lots of juices that have already started to accumulate. Get all the juice in there as well, because we want all of that cherry flavor. And then the sugar goes in, so I'll hold back probably about 1/4 cup. So I can always add more sugar later. So the rest of the ingredients here are gonna go in my filling. I'm also gonna add my salt. It's just 1/4 teaspoon, very little, but you're like seasoning the filling. So now this is gonna go onto my stovetop, and here's what I wanna do. I want to bring everything up to a boil. That is also going to dissolve the sugar. So I'm gonna have basically the cherries kind of cooking in this syrup. And I am going to cook them very gently for a brief period of time, just until they're kind of collapsed and have lost some of their volume and have given off their juices. I don't need to cook them any further than that, because now that they've been frozen and thawed, they've already kind of softened. And then I'm gonna strain them and reduce the juice. So it's gonna take a little while, but I'll show it to you over at the stove. I'm gonna cook this over medium-high heat because I wanna bring all those juices up to a boil, dissolve the sugar. So I'm just sort of gently stirring, and already there's quite a bit of liquid in here. This is why it's a good idea to start with thawed cherries, is because if they're room temp, you're gonna get like more even cooking. They're gonna all sort of come up at the same time in terms of temperature and release their juice at the same time. I simmered the cherries for a minute or two, and now what I wanna do is actually drain them and collect all those juices. So I have a strainer here set over a medium bowl. I could just cook this whole thing together and reduce all the liquid, but the cherries are gonna eventually start to break down and become super mushy, and I want them to maintain some of their texture. So that means separating the juice from the fruit. So watch how much comes out of this. Like watch how much liquid. So if I didn't reduce the cherries, all that liquid would be inside my hand pies and it would just kind of be a mess. So you can see all this juice right here. This is gonna go back into my pot. And now I'll let the cherries continue to drain. And in the meantime, I'm gonna start to reduce this cherry juice down, and I want it to be around 3/4 of a cup. And that's gonna take a little bit of time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And a few times I went in and just kind of poured in, if there's a couple teaspoons of liquid still coming out of the cherries, I added that. While that's reducing, I'm gonna show you the next step. So I have 3 tablespoons cornstarch, 3 tablespoons of cool tap water. Just going to stir the water into the cornstarch. This is something called a slurry, which is a way of, you kind of like quickly dissolve the cornstarch in a little bit of liquid before you add it to another liquid, and that helps to prevent lumps. Okay, so there's our cornstarch slurry. The last maybe 2 teaspoons of juice are gonna go back in there. All right, let's check the level again. I'm about there. I'm gonna work off the heat for now. So I have that 3/4 of a cup of reduced cherry juice, and I have my slurry. Whisking the cherry juices constantly, I'm gonna stream in my cornstarch slurry. So this is gonna go into this hot liquid. If you have any kind of undissolved cornstarch in your little bowl, go ahead and scrape that in. You have to cook cornstarch for it to activate. So in a pie, that happens slowly in the oven as everything is baking and the juices kind of bubble and reach that boiling point. But it's not gonna happen when we fry them. So I'm gonna do that now. So that I have to bring this back to a boil, and I'm gonna whisk constantly because it's gonna thicken quite a bit. And it is really important that you sufficiently cook this. When I was testing the recipe, at one point, I can't remember if I used too little cornstarch or if I just didn't cook it enough, and the juices stayed kind of runny. So we don't want that to happen. So I'll show you, there's gonna be a pretty dramatic transformation in texture. So that's the change. You'll know that you cooked it enough when you have a mixture that looks like this. It's gonna be thick, and it's gonna almost have the consistency of like a jam or a jelly. It's gonna sort of hold its shape. So now to finish the filling, I have a lemon. I'm gonna grate in about a teaspoon of fresh zest, which is like usually close to about half a lemon. Then I'm actually gonna save the lemon because I need 2 teaspoons of juice for the glaze that comes later. Just a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. I like a little bit of warm spice with cherry filling, but not enough that you know that there's cinnamon there. So it's just a 1/4 teaspoon. Then a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And actually a little bit of vanilla extract also goes into the glaze. So I'm gonna stir all that together. From just sitting here, I have probably another maybe scant tablespoon of cherry juice. I'm gonna not add that. That can just get discarded or save it for like seltzer or something. Because again, I don't wanna water down these thickened juices. And then the cherries go in. If you can make this ahead of time, all you have to do is combine the cherries and the thickened juices and put it in the bowl and put it in the fridge for it to cool down. But I'm gonna try to make these straight away. So I'm going to actually stir this over an ice bath to quickly cool it down. It takes the better part of an hour in the fridge to get cold, but I don't have that kind of time right now. Here I have this incredibly beautiful, no juices that are gonna run anywhere. It's already sweetened, ready to go pie filling. I am ready to assemble, but first I'm gonna cool this down. So that just means grabbing a big bowl of ice water and kind of stirring this until everything is, if not cold, at least room temp. And the reason I combined everything back in the saucepan is because the saucepan is metal. So it's most effective to use a metal vessel inside of an ice bath because you get the quickest transfer of heat, so it gets cold faster. So I'm just gonna grab a large bowl, throw some ice water in it. Obviously you don't want the water level to rise and overflow out of the bowl, so you wanna fill it like 1/3 of the way, and then just stir it and it gets cold really fast. What does that cat want? Not even 2 minutes in the ice bath and it's already cold to the touch or cool to the touch. This is ready to go. Get rid of this ice bath. So I'm just gonna scrape the filling into a small bowl. One of the most frustrating things if you're ever forming little individual hand pies is having the juices run across the pastry and make it difficult to complete the crimp and to really close up the pastry. So I just know that that won't happen here. That's my filling. I am now going to grab those squares of pastry and show you how to form each hand pie. I have 1 sheet of pastry that I pulled out of the fridge because I don't want to just leave all the other pastry pieces like coming up to room temperature and just sitting there because I don't want to work with warm pastry. So it's best to work one at a time. And I've oriented it like a diamond because I'm actually going to be folding it in half on the diagonal to make a triangle. So I'm just going to take a little scoop, and it looks like a scant amount of filling, but it doesn't reduce at all. And so it's just really difficult to close up an overfilled hand pie. So we want to avoid that. Maybe I'll add like another little cherry. I can kind of go ahead and like spread it out across one side. Then for the fried ones, I just use a little bit of water to help me seal the border. I'm just gonna brush with my finger along the edges of the pastry. You can see I'm leaving a nice clean border without any of the cherries. Then I'm gonna fold the top half down over the bottom half, and I'm gonna align all the points in the edges. And then I'm gonna sort of gently press all along those borders to seal and get them to adhere a little bit. And as you work, it's a good idea to try to press out any big air bubbles because those will expand as you fry them or bake them. And now I have a fork. I'm gonna go along the border of each one, about a 1/2 inch in, and crimp with the tines of the fork. That's gonna really seal the 2 edges together. If you have kind of irregular edges then because of that crimping, you can just take like a bench scraper or even a knife and go ahead and straighten them off like that. I do think it actually helps to seal them together a little bit more. So that's just sort of a bonus step if you like, and it helps them look super neat. That's it. I've gone and I formed the first hand pie. So into the freezer for this guy, and then I'm gonna continue that same forming process for the 7 remaining squares of dough, same amount of filling, same process until I have all 8 formed. You might get some cherry juices like trying to peek out. Just wipe them away and like tuck it in and keep going. You'll be able to seal it. Because I'm gonna do half of them baked, there's a very, very slight difference in, oh, kitty cat, come on. No. Definitely not on the counter. I'll clean this off. There's a slight difference in how I'm going to form the hand pies. I'm going to use a little bit of egg wash, which is just a beaten egg, rather than water to close them up and seal them. That's because when they bake, they're a lot more likely to kind of open up and leak out. And the egg is like a stronger glue. Oh no, kitty. And then I'm going to brush them with the rest of that egg before baking. So just a slight difference. Now I'm going to make the second half of all the hand pies with the egg to seal. So you can see how pretty and nice and neat they look. So the ones that are baked don't get the icing on them because they get a little egg wash. Like I really want to do egg wash if it's going to get baked because it's going to make it so shiny and beautiful. So I'll do a little bit of demerara sugar, or you could just do granulated since that's what you used in the recipe. These look so good. Final thing is just a little 1-inch slit right down the center to allow moisture and air to escape. Okay, so I actually kind of ran out of freezer space, so these were in the fridge and for not even that long. They could be colder. I wish they were colder, but it's quitting time soon. So these are gonna go into the oven. It's at 375. The hood is on, so pardon the slight background noise. I am at about 350 in my oil. I turned down the heat a little bit because I didn't want it to crank up too high. Now I'm gonna grab 2 of the pies from the freezer and gently lower them into the oil. You might be surprised at sort of the lack of bubbling. Like there's not a ton of moisture coming off these. So these are gonna go in, I should go this way. I'm gonna do 2 at a time. And 350 is really the right temperature for this because any higher and you end up with a really browned crust that isn't fully cooked all the way through, and any lower they end up like a little oily. I'm a little bit low because I'm adding 2 pretty large masses of cold like material to hot oil, so that's gonna cause the temperature to drop. So I just turned it up a little bit. I want to crank up the heat so that I can maintain as consistent a temperature as I possibly can as they cook. So just be kind of moderating the heat as you go. And once I start to see some good browning, I'll flip them. I would say as far as deep, oh my God, we're getting a little brown on the bottom, oh God. So the oil temperature dropped and I overcompensated by turning up the temp really high, but then the crust that was in contact with the bottom got really, really brown. So we'll see if we can kind of salvage these. Ignore the part where they're burned, but they're looking extremely flaky. Okay, I'm gonna grab the other 2. So, you know, unlike a yeasted thing, these don't immediately fill with air as they're frying. Like that, the sort of amount of air in there doesn't really change because we don't have bubbling juices. They're all really well sealed. We pressed out the air bubbles, so don't expect them to float and bob on the surface like you would donuts. So it does help to have a little bit of depth in there so that they go in and they submerge. So I'm gonna flip this guy just to make sure that I'm not getting too much browning on the bottom. Ah, that looks good. Very nice color.
Looks a little like the Gowanus Canal.
You like the color?
Yeah. It's gonna be a little deeper, but these have been in for a while. I'm actually gonna leave the hood on because it smells like a delicious restaurant in here. So I just turned off my oil. I'm done frying my hand pies. So let's go back over to the counter. Now I'm gonna make my glaze. I have my confectioner sugar or powdered sugar right here. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of milk, then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And that one I'm gonna kind of eyeball. Then lastly, 2 teaspoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And this is a wedge from that lemon where I used the zest from it for the filling. So we can always adjust the consistency, but you want something that's pourable, but is still really opaque and thick enough that it's gonna hold its shape on the surface of the pastry. And often with any kind of glaze or powdered sugar icing, I always feel like it needs to be thicker than you think. And this consistency looks good to me. So I don't think I need to adjust with additional liquid. You could add a little bit more lemon juice or just like even a little bit of water. And if you are gonna thin it out, just go drop by drop because a little bit will kind of drastically adjust the consistency. Let's take a look at the hand pies. They're still pretty hot. They are incredibly flaky. They did get pretty dark in some places because these pretty much maintain their density. They tend to sink to the bottom and kind of sit along the bottom of the pot. So you are going for as even a golden brown texture as possible. Like this one looks pretty good. You can hear when I pick them up, they just almost like fall apart. Look at this flakiness. Oh my God, so flaky. I mean, really the flakiest pies you'll ever make. So I just peeked in the oven. The ones that are baking have been in for 43 minutes and they look great. So I'm gonna pull them out. I had some light leakage, especially this one over here. But other than that, like even if you have a seam that bursts a little, because those juices were pre-thickened and cooked down, you don't get a lot of leakage. So I know that like all that filling is in there. I'm gonna go ahead and glaze the fried ones. And there's no real secret here. I'm just gonna let it drop off the whisk onto the pastry, like so. It does not take a long time for the glaze to kind of re-harden a little bit. I'm super happy about this. I'm gonna cut into one baked and one fried. So we'll do a little side-by-side comparison. So right off the bat, they both actually feel incredibly flaky and tender. The fried ones feel kind of solid, like you could really truly put them in like a little cardboard sleeve and eat them with one hand. So let's cut into this guy. So incredibly flaky, cutting through that pastry. I love the way the interior looks. The filling is juicy and set, but it's not like gloopy, gloppy, you know, like pasty, sort of starchy texture, and it's fully cooked through, so that's really important. There is the perfect amount of added sweetness from the glaze. The cherry flavor is intense and concentrated, but it doesn't give like artificial flavor at all. It's really from concentrating down all the cherry juices. Look at how flaky. Insane. It's gonna be hard to beat. I think I already like this one better than the baked one. But it's kind of a different thing. It's so good. It kind of gives me like state fair in the best possible way. If I made these at state fair, they'd be like $25 each. All right, let's try the baked one. Similarly, super tender and flaky. So here, because of the way it cooked, where I wasn't turning it and it was sitting kind of on that one side for the entire duration of the cooking, like the top is a little flakier and the bottom is a little bit more compressed. Very normal, but it's baked through, so it's not like I have any areas of raw pastry. Filling looks great. First of all, hot. The experience of eating the baked one, you get a lot more of the butter flavor from the pastry, which of course I love. That's where this one I think like holds its own a little bit against the fried. I guess if I had to pick one to eat right now just for like my mood and how I feel at the moment, I would pick fried, but both are so extremely good. I love frozen sour cherries. They're a fantastic baking fruit. You can fry them, you can bake them, you can do a little bit of both. So it just feels like something out of a mid-century magazine or something like that. They're just, can't beat them. This is such a fun recipe to make, and I love bringing you all of my favorites from What's for Dessert, but also let us know in the comments if you have any sort of burning desire to see me make something in particular. I always love taking cues from viewers. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.